Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by NextGen Purpose. EI serves up thoughtful conversations with industry leaders and pioneers who support a regenerative future for our food system. The stories shared by our guests are meant to spark curiosity and inspire informed global change. Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. Today with me is Meredith Shepherd, founder of Loving Carrots. Welcome, Meredith.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Me too, and I'm excited to learn about Loving Carrots and what inspired you to found Loving Carrots. And before we get going, I'd love for you to just make a quick intro for our guests and our viewers so that they know, before we dive into everything, what we're talking about.
Okay, sure. So Loving Carrots has been around since 2011, and we are a company that designs, installs, and maintains vegetable gardens and foodscapes for people. We also have a big educational component, so we provide garden coaching. Our bread and butter installation is raised beds. We do a lot of raised bed gardening in residential backyards, but we also work with schools and law firms and nonprofits, kind of the whole gamut. We are a growing company. We started with just me and my Subaru that I completely destroyed with fish emulsion and hay bales. And now we're a staff of, we're probably going to be 22 or 23 this year. And we typically install about 150 projects a season, and we have about 150 gardens on our maintenance roster. So we are helping people all over the city get started growing food and teaching them how to do it.
Out of curiosity, do you work remotely too?
Not really. No.
Okay.
You mean like helping people in other cities?
Selfish question. That was a little
yeah.
selfish question.
Yeah.
But that's amazing what you do. And, I'm just, as you're talking about it and as you're talking about these gardens, I'm thinking about my edible garden in the backyard, which I'm sure our listeners are as well. Thinking about, we came out of COVID and people started these gardens and they're like, okay, well, mine's dying now, or I don't know how to do this. So I was just trying to help those listeners and viewers.
Yeah. Gardening, like you were saying earlier that you live in Northern California, so you can grow all sorts of fun things that I can't do here.
I can try. I'm a little bit, my learning curve coming from a big city. I've got a very large learning curve that I'm dealing with. But let's talk about this, because what inspired you to start this in 2011?
In 2011, I had come from, I had been farming for years, managing small organic farms in the area, or one in particular. And I really was intrigued by the concept of urban agriculture. It seemed like I've always been a passionate environmentalist, and encouraging people to grow their own food and urban agriculture always seemed like such a beautiful solution to so many environmental problems, like food miles and seasonality and getting rid of sod, not to mention all of the physical and mental benefits that gardens bring to people. So that really kind of intrigued me. And at the time I was living in DC and I didn't have any sunlight in my yard, but my neighbor, on the other hand, had this huge sunny yard. And I thought, oh, well, I really want to garden for myself. Maybe he'll let me garden in a little corner of his yard. And then I thought, well, maybe he'd actually pay me for that. And that was kind of like the spark moment. And I literally took out a flyer. I made a flyer in a coffee shop, came up with the name, and kind of started hanging it around town. And it just has really snowballed from there. I haven't stopped. So
I love that. That's great. So you started with a corner of a yard.
Well, I didn't end up doing that garden. I never asked him. I never asked the neighbor. But, but I did completely destroy my yard with perennial plant storage. And then my first grow room to start transplants was in my basement. I cleared out a bunch of shelves. And every year I give a presentation to my staff, or the new staff anyway, about our humble beginnings. And so I show a picture of that first greenhouse and the first couple of projects that we did. And then I show, we talk about right now we have 1,000 square foot greenhouse where we're producing, thousands of transplants. And it's really just over the years, little by little by little, it's grown into a really amazing thing with amazing people working for it. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is creating careers for people who want to work in urban farming, because back in 2011, I did apply to other jobs before doing Loving Carrots. I thought, okay, well, I'll try to find a job at an urban garden somewhere. And so there were only like 2 positions available. And, you know, now we're host to 22, and there's other companies that have popped up all over DC doing similar stuff. And so it's really a movement that's grown a lot. And I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like it's growing and moving and expanding, and you're helping that movement. So when you started, you were working in farming, and you took to become an entrepreneur. What was that like for you?
Well, you know, I did not have a business background at all. So it was a learning curve for me. So you have a learning curve with growing a garden. Well, I didn't even know that I needed a business license. And I only figured that out because I went to the bank and asked them to make it so that my account could have Loving Carrots on it. I wanted people to write checks to Loving Carrots, not to me. And they said, sure, well, what's your EIN? And I said, oh, what's an EIN? And they said, well, you've got to go to the, you know, USDA or the whatever, the government for that. And then, you know, I went to that office and I asked for an EIN, and they said, well, what's your business license number? And I said, well, what's that? Like, you know, and I just like worked my way backwards over the course of a week and finally got all my ducks in a row. So yeah, no business training. I think, you know, I don't recommend that as an entrepreneurial advice, just jumping in with no experience and no plan. But I think that I really struck a vein, and I was kind of at the right place at the right time, and I just happened to have the right expertise. So it worked out for me. But I don't think everyone can claim to be that lucky. So it was a learning curve. A learning curve.
Right. And I'm sure as a business owner, there's lots of skills that you don't have and I don't have, right? And we surround ourselves with people with those skill sets. So even in your business, you have the vision and you have the expertise to do what you're doing, but to run the business, you're probably bringing in other people to fill in.
It's all about your team. It's all about, you know, like finding good people and keeping those people, keeping them happy, doing whatever it takes. Because yes, you can't do everything. And I remember the first garden installation that where I set up the crew of people. There was just 3 people at that time, and then I left. I wasn't there actually doing the work, and it was a big moment for me. I remember that. But I had, you know, those guys were there. I had a really good, committed employee named Morgan in the very beginning, and I relied heavily on those people along the way. And now, you know, my team. I mean, I just can't say enough positive about them. I obviously couldn't do it without them. So
yeah, what was it like to be able to sort of give off the reins to somebody and trust that they were going to do the work?
Yeah, well, you know, with the right people, it's not a leap of faith even. It's just you feel confident and you can walk away and think about something else and not stress. So like, you know, that hasn't been every employee that's come through. I've had, you know, over 10, 11 years, there's been a lot of people that come in and out the door, and you know, most of them are great, some of them are not as great, but I don't want, you know, to talk about that.
No.
But yeah, it's you know, people in a small business are everything, and it's important to put just as much effort into, you know, your team and your community, and making sure that your company culture is positive and helpful and good. And that takes work too. You know, that doesn't just, even if the people are awesome, it doesn't always just happen naturally. So that's almost as important as, you know, knowing what you're doing with tomato plants or seeding carrots. So
did you have to implement, is there a process that you implemented that you found that worked as you went through these stages to make sure that you could know that your employees were doing the job that you wanted at each place, so that you had your success?
There at Loving Carrots, we are very, very systems driven. We just have to be, and I think that's what makes us like a good, you know, I can call us a good contractor. You know, we show up when we're gonna show up. We know what we're doing when we get there. We take as long as we say we're gonna take, and the bill on the end is like 99.9% of the time the accurate bill. And that is because we have just built systems on systems, and the people, it's not me who's implementing all those systems, it's my awesome staff. But yeah, so like there's a system for creating a checklist for a loading for the installation crew for the truck for that job that day. There's loading checklists for my farmers, or the people who do the maintenance for them. We're really Google Calendar based. So we have spreadsheets that are tracking like the time in each of the gardens so that we're planning for enough time in the day. We have scheduled loading times. And I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it. In order to show up, in a garden, to build a garden, if you drive, some of our gardens are an hour and a half away, you drive all the way out there and forgot some little like really important irrigation piece that is key. Without it, you can't water the garden, and then you just can't leave. So you've got to be organized to remember, 1,000 different little pieces, and to, get them all ready and to the right location at the right time and know what you're doing. It takes a lot of systems building, and that's what we do. I love systems. I'm always talking about efficiencies and things like that. So yeah, and that's kind of it. That's something that I don't think you can do that overnight. I think it just takes experience
and time, right? I mean, trial and error. I'm sure that, some of the lessons that you learned along the way helped you create the systems that you have today.
Absolutely. And, back to those people and trusting your people. I'm not the one out there digging the dirt as much anymore, or if at all. And so if I have good people that are doing that, they're going to help me, find holes in my systems or improve them so that their jobs are easier as well. And the next person's job is easier. And that's a really quality employee to have.
Yeah, it's so important. So you've been around now for a little while. You've got those, and you're doing really well. What do you have going on that's new and exciting in the next year and share?
Yeah, well, I guess like coming out of the pandemic, was a big building year for us. So we've hired, I should have gotten a count. I've honestly lost count of how many new people we've hired this year. I think it's 8 or 9. So that's really exciting, having like a new fresh team. And right now we're gearing up for the 2023 season. And in my experience, 11 Carrots, I don't know how this happened. Well, I know how this happened, that good people building on the previous team's experience every year is just so much better than the previous year. And we'll create a new system where we look back and we think, how did we even do this without that thing? But we're doing some hardscaping training. We don't just do vegetable garden beds. We also build, landscapes, like typical landscaping. We focus on, fostering a healthy ecosystem and planting natives and, storing rainwater on site, things like that. So that's a new skill. I'm always trying to build our installation team's skills. And we're also bringing in some new leadership. I'm looking for a new garden operations manager. So that'll be fun too. Yeah. I should say this past winter, we built our biggest garden ever and we completed it. And it was completed on schedule with no major issues. So that was really exciting. It was more than double. Oh, it was like 22 raised beds, but also like everything was river pebble paths. There's a stone patio in the center, a cedar trim fence with critter cage. I mean, it was like this big garden with all the bells and whistles.
Wow, it sounds beautiful.
It was really fun. I didn't design it. My coworker Carly is a great gardener and really wonderful garden designer, and she designed it, and we're really proud of it. So that was exciting.
Wow, I would love to see a picture of it because it just sounds beautiful.
Well, I'll send it to you in June when there's plants in it, because right now it's a lot of dirt.
Well, I bet it's more beautiful and colorful with all the plants in it.
Yeah, it will.
So now, it sounds like so much keeps going on. I'm curious, as you did mention the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic and how things are evolving, how did the pandemic affect you guys? Because I know that I had read so much about people growing home gardens, as did I. I have a home garden. How did that affect your business?
Yeah, man, 2020 was, it was pretty wild. I think, you know, there was that April period in the spring where we happened to be working on one big project that we could just kind of put our heads down and focus on it. And that was really, really lucky. And the homeowner was really, really kind and, you know, just understanding of us taking a long time and all that. But as soon as the pandemic hit and all the restaurants basically closed down, I lost 30% of my maintenance revenue, because all of our restaurant clients just dropped out, all but one. And that was about 30% of that revenue. But it was very quickly replaced with homeowners who were at home looking out their back window, panicking about being able to get vegetables. You know, if you remember, like the grocery store shelves were bare and people were like ordering, you know, spinach and frozen squash off Amazon. It was really crazy. So we got a lot of like doomsday prepper people in, but also just folks who were looking at their backyard and working from home and wanted to spend more time outside. So while we did, you know, suffer a loss with the restaurants, it was like filled in and more so with everything else. And it was a really busy year, and a really, and it was a year that really tested our adaptability, you know, because we were always dealing with new information coming in about the pandemic and like how it transferred. And we had to set up, you know, hand sanitizing stations and figure out how to get the crews to site without riding in the same truck, you know, all of these just workarounds. So that took a lot of management's time, coming up with evolving company policies, everything. So I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's over. But I do think that the silver lining is that a lot of people are really appreciating their yards in a bigger way. A lot of people that, you know, without the pandemic probably wouldn't have spent as much time outside. Yeah. So I'm grateful for that.
A lot of people got dirty and wanted to get more involved with their garden and get back to
yeah.
Myself, I mean, I wouldn't say I got back to it. I got into it.
Mm-hmm. You did?
Yeah.
You're a pandemic gardener. That's cool.
I'm a pandemic gardener. I mean, my garden in growing up was what? Central Park? That's not really a garden, right? So I was a first-time gardener. I grew some lemons, some herbs, some rosemary, some lemon, you know.
Cool.
So, and now I got a little bit more ambitious with some tomatoes, and we have of Thai basil. It's very explosive.
Goes nuts. Yeah, basil's one of the, it's like a gateway drug. I say if you're just starting out and you're nervous, grow some basil, put it in the sun, and it just grows like a weed. And people are like, I could do it.
Then I have mint too. That
mint
goes everywhere.
Yeah, I heard you say lemons though. I've got like my 3 really sad indoor lemon trees here that barely produce any lemons. I wish we could grow lemons in DC, but we can't. We're not really.
I have lemons and grapefruit, olives, and what else do I have? I have over there, I have another fruit tree. Figs.
Figs. Cool.
I think that I live in the Mediterranean, apparently. So my house.
That's the great thing about Northern California. It's like, do I want to be Florida or do I want to be, or you know, you could be the Caribbean and the Mediterranean.
I decided my backyard was going to be Mediterranean, so the olive trees and the figs and you know all that kind of stuff. So I decided. So not all of it, you know, we did have some deer issues, so they did come and eat them, but I'm working on them, and my gardener helps me.
Oh, good. Well, that sounds really rewarding. I would love to go and eat my own grapefruits. Yeah, can't do that here.
Yeah, so I'm curious though. You know, as a first-time entrepreneur, you have such great successes. You know, the continued growth, the pivoting, all of that. When you look back, is there anything you might have wished you had known along the way?
I mean, there's so many things.
Or done differently.
Yeah, I think, I guess like one, I don't want to say like a sadness, but one thing that, you know, kind of is on my mind day to day is that in the beginning, the easiest thing for me to kind of, you know, assign to somebody else was the physical work, right? because there was always in those early days, I did all my own invoicing and record keeping, and it, now I have people who help me with that, and they're much better at it than I am. But, I was doing it back then, and that was something that like I couldn't really teach someone else to do because it was all in my head. And so, contracting out the gardening and the actual building of the gardens was what happened. And, when I set out to build this company, I pictured myself being the gardener. I started it all because I wanted to garden for a living. I came from a farming background, and I love being outside, and I get to be outside a lot because I still do a lot of the initial meetings where I are doing site analysis and designing the gardens and talking to the new people who are just getting started. And that's one of my favorite parts of the job. But, my hands are super soft. I don't have as much practice or just time. My days are mostly not gardening nowadays. I do have time for my own garden now, which I didn't for years when I was getting started. So that's a real reward. But looking back, that's one thing that it just kind of, one day I woke up and I was like, wait a minute, like I'm not gardening as much, they're gardening, and do I want that? And it was kind of too late. So
And so what do you hope to see, a few years down the line with your business?
I am really excited to, I don't know if this is exciting for other people to hear, but I'm excited to build my management team. I've got some really, like I said before, some really exciting new people in the door. And we are kind of overhauling a few systems that I think are going to make us just even better at what we do. I always want to be the best gardeners that we can be. I want our gardens to be beautiful, and planting rows of seeds of lettuce that are color patterns and things like that. And I just, I'm not trying to take over the world. I'm not trying to take over the country or expand to other cities or anything. I want to get better at what we do. And I think we're going to have a big leap year in that respect.
And so, the goals, the expectations for yourself are really, it's just about doing the best that you can do. And how do you establish that? That's what it sounds like. That's what I'm hearing from you, right? And so, how do you set that up for yourself as an entrepreneur, as a founder? Because I think other founders would really get a lot out of hearing that, because sometimes we look at other founders and it seems like they make these big giant leaps and it seems overwhelming and it's not achievable. And so what I'm hearing from you seems very realistic and something attainable. And I'd love to hear how you put that, put that into place, and then how you attain it, so that our founders and people that are listening can maybe learn a little from your plan, how you put your plan in place.
Yeah. I think that, patience and baby steps are an important thing patience is important to have, and just understanding that it's not going to be perfect overnight, that you're going to, pick one thing to improve every year and work really hard at that, and then, move on to the next thing. You can't improve everything all at once. And that's kind of how we've always done things, just because of capacity, right? We can't stop. You can't stop everything and say, okay, wait, let's just change the way we do everything. And then start back up again. It's just not possible. So, each year we pick one small thing that we need to do, and we work on it, and then we get there, and then we move on. So, you can't plan for everything. You're going to make a ton of mistakes. But that's okay. That's part of the learning process, and, it'll make you stronger. So hang in there.
Well, I think that's really wise. And I think it's really, it almost sort of lifts a weight off your shoulders hearing something like that from a fellow entrepreneur, because often we see these companies, whether it's Oatly or whoever, that all of a sudden you think, wow, they turned into an overnight success, but really that took a really long time if you read the whole story. Right.
And it's important to remember that every company looks super cool and calm and organized on Instagram.
Right.
And when we open the door and when you get in there, it might be kind of messy, but everyone's putting their good brand foot forward.
Awesome.
Nobody's perfect.
Thank you, Meredith. Thanks so much for joining me today on Essential Ingredients. It's so great to hear from you, meet you, and learn a little bit about loving carrots.
Thank you so much. It was really awesome to be here. I love your podcast.
Thanks.
To learn more about these episodes and access show notes, go to nextgenpurpose.com and choose podcast. If you like this episode, head to Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform to subscribe and leave us a review. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel to subscribe to our EI videocast and give this episode a like while you're there. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Next Gen Purpose and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Justine_Reichman. Thanks for joining us.